Hello and welcome to Standard 10 of the Care Certificate Workbooks. My name is Daniel Dutton and I run the website dsdweb.co.uk, which provides free help, guidance and support for people that are studying for care qualifications. In this video, we will be looking at Standard 10, Safeguarding Adults. This standard explores how you can fulfil your duty of care towards vulnerable individuals by protecting them from abuse and neglect. For further information about this standard, visit DSD Web by clicking the link in the description. I did say in a previous video that I wanted to try and get all the care certificate videos completed by the end of 2020. It's now January 2021 and I've still got 5 left to do after this one, so many apologies to those that have been waiting patiently. I'm working hard to get them written, recorded and uploaded as quickly as possible. As always, try to relate the information in this video to your own practice and write your answers in your own words. Before continuing, I'd be grateful if you could click the thumbs up button to like this video and subscribe to my channel. This helps me to understand if my videos are useful and you will be notified when I upload new content. Thank you. The first activity asks you to explain what the term safeguarding adults means and what your own role and responsibilities relating to safeguarding are. The Care Act 2014 statutory guidance defines adult safeguarding as protecting an adult's right to live in safety, free from abuse and neglect. As a health and social care worker, you have a responsibility to ensure that your actions and also any lack of action does not result in harm to individuals. You should ensure that you are familiar with your employer's policies and procedures, particularly their safeguarding policy, so that you carry out your role in a way that protects yourself and others. If you have any safeguarding concerns, you should report them to your manager or safeguarding lead immediately. Even if an individual discloses to you that they have been abused but does not want others to know, this is an exceptional circumstance where your duty of care overrides their right to confidentiality. You should attend any training that your employer provides relating to safeguarding, work in partnership with other agencies when dealing with safeguarding issues, and promote the rights and independence of the individuals you support. Being empowered can reduce the likelihood of an individual being abused. Familiarity with the Code of Conduct for Adult Care Workers that can be found on the Skills for Health and Skills for Care websites is also a useful source of information about your responsibilities as a care worker. Excuse me. The next question asks you to list 10 types of abuse, along with some possible indicators that would raise concerns. I'm not sure why, but I always remember these as 6 abuses, 2 neglects, modern slavery, and domestic violence. Breaking them into these subcategories seems to aid my recall, so feel free to do the same if it helps you too. First up is physical abuse. This is when an individual is subjected to bodily harm. Examples include being hit, burned, or pushed. It also includes unlawful physical and medical restraint, examples of which are being locked in a room or covertly given sedatives. Indicators of physical abuse could include unexplained injuries, a history or high frequency of injuries, reluctance to seek medical attention, signs of malnutrition, changes in behaviour when in the presence of a particular person, cuts, bruises, burns, and scalds. Psychological or emotional abuse is when a person is deliberately made to feel like they have no value or worth. It includes harassment, threats and intimidation, enforced social isolation, prevention of access to services, activities and relationships, verbal abuse, bullying and cyberbullying. Some indicators of psychological abuse include changes in behaviour, especially in the presence of a particular person, low self-esteem and self-confidence, anxiety, insomnia, sadness or anger. Sexual abuse is non-consensual sexual activities, which, as well as sexual intimacy, can also refer to indecent exposure, being forced to watch a sexual act or pornography, and sexual harassment. Indicators of sexual abuse include bruising, bleeding, pain or itching in the genital areas, difficulty walking or sitting down, torn or bloody underwear, unexplained sexually transmitted diseases, unexplained pregnancy, changes in behaviour, particularly using more sexually explicit language, reluctance to be alone with a particular person or receive assistance with personal care, self-harming, withdrawal, and insomnia. Financial or material abuse is the use of another person's money or belongings without their consent, which includes theft, fraud, scamming, misuse of benefits or personal payments, unauthorized borrowing, or using an individual's possessions without permission. It is important to point out that as a care worker, we have a strictly professional relationship with the individuals that we care for, so we should not accept the use of an individual's money or belongings, including gifts, even with their consent. Indicators of financial abuse can include an individual not having enough money to pay their bills or their home appearing much more sparse than it did previously, changes to an individual's will or the deed to their home, unexplained spending or missing financial accounts. Organisational or institutional abuse is when a care worker provides the needs of their organisation above the needs of the individuals that they support. Organisational policies, processes and practices will not be aligned with person-centred values such as choice or respect because it is easier and cheaper. For example, a care home that has rigid routines for when the residents go to bed or wake up without them being offered choice is an example of organisational abuse. Indicators of organisational abuse include poor practice and standards of care, individuals are being neglected, low levels of staffing or other resources, lack of flexibility, poor or missing records, poorly trained staff, lack of leadership, management and supervision, and a lack of choice, respect and privacy. Discriminatory abuse is unfair treatment such as verbal abuse, harassment, denial of basic rights, or providing a substandard service which is based on one of the 9 protected characteristics specified by the Equality Act 2010. They are race, age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, gender reassignment, religion or belief, marriage or civil partnership, and maternity. Indicators of discriminatory abuse can include sadness, anger, frustration, fear, anxiety, withdrawal, little to no participation, and services not catering for an individual's needs based on one of their protected characteristics. Neglect is the failure to not meet the basic needs of the individuals that you are responsible for, which can include ignoring individuals, isolating individuals, withholding necessities such as food, drink, warmth, medicine, etc., and failure to promote privacy and dignity. Indicators include poor hygiene, malnutrition, dehydration, unsafe living conditions, a dishevelled or dirty appearance, accumulation of medication, pressure sores and ulcers, untreated medical conditions, and inadequate clothing. Similar to neglect, self-neglect is an individual being unable or refusing to take care of their own basic needs so much that it affects their own health and safety and puts them at risk of harm. It is their inability or unwillingness to manage their own affairs and has many of the same indicators previously stated for neglect. Modern slavery is forcing an individual into a life of servitude and inhumane treatment. Examples include forced labour, sexual exploitation, human trafficking, domestic servitude, and debt bondage. As well as signs of physical and emotional abuse, as we discussed previously, indicators of modern slavery also include malnourishment, an unkempt appearance, poor living conditions, suspicion, fear, and avoidance of the police and other people, lack of property and ID, and appearing to be under the control of others. Finally, domestic violence refers to any type of abuse between adults that are family or intimate partners. Indicators of abuse can include any of the signs already discussed for the other types of abuse and neglect. The next activity asks you why you think that an individual that receives care and support may be more vulnerable to abuse and neglect than others. Individuals receiving care may be dependent on others to assist them with certain activities, which can potentially leave them susceptible to abuse or neglect. They may receive care in their own home, which is easier for an abuser to hide actions, or a residential or care home where the standards are poor and inflexible. Poor staff training can result in inappropriate action being taken against individuals that display behaviour that challenges. They may have specialist needs that are not being catered for. Individuals with learning disabilities or dementia may not realise that they are being abused or be unable to understand how they can prevent it. Individuals receiving care may not be able to communicate that they have suffered abuse, or their disclosures may not be taken seriously. The next activity provides 4 examples and asks you to explain why they would increase the likelihood of abuse. The first example is being cared for in their own home. This makes an individual more susceptible to abuse because it is easier for an abuser to conceal their actions when they are inside the individual's home. The next example is being in residential or institutional care. This increases the likelihood of organisational abuse if the organisation or institution has poor standards and is resource-led rather than person-centred. The third example is an individual experiencing a mental health issue. This may mean that they have reduced capacity and are unable to understand that abuse has occurred or what they can do about it. It could also result in them not being believed if they disclose the abuse. For example, if an individual has psychosis, staff may consider a disclosure of abuse to be a delusion or a hallucination. The final example is experiencing difficulties with communication. This could increase the likelihood of abuse because the individual may be unable to tell others any abuse or neglect that has occurred. Activity 10.1F asks you to describe what is meant by the term restrictive practice and when it may be used. The Code of Practice for the Mental Health Act 1983 describes restrictive practice as deliberate acts on the part of other persons that restrict a patient's movement, liberty and/or freedom to act independently in order to take immediate control of a dangerous situation where there is a real possibility of harm to the person or others if no action is undertaken, and end or reduce significantly the danger to the patient or others. Restrictive interventions should not be used to punish or for the sole intention of inflicting pain, suffering, or humiliation. Restrictive practice could include physical restraint as well as the use of devices, medication, and seclusion. To prevent a breach of human rights, it should only be used when absolutely necessary, be legally and ethically justified, and the least restrictive option should always be used. The next activity asks you to list 6 factors that have featured in cases of adult abuse and neglect. The first has already been completed and is a failure to identify signs of abuse. You can sign up to access a library of safeguarding adult reviews on the SCIE website, where you can discover some of the reasons that have been identified for abuse and neglect following an investigation in real-life cases. You may also want to search for recent news stories or watch television programmes relating to abuse and neglect in care settings, such as the Panorama investigation into Winterbourne View. Some options to consider include complaints not investigated, both internally and complaints made to CQC, poor recruitment processes, inadequate staff training and supervision, an organisational culture of abuse, lack of organisational leadership and management. The next activity asks you to describe 4 sources of information and advice about your role and responsibilities relating to safeguarding. A great source of information will be your employer's safeguarding policy and procedure. Excuse me. This will explain how your organisation handles suspicions of abuse and the processes and systems that should be followed. In a similar vein, you should receive safeguarding training, which will teach you about safeguarding in general as well as your particular roles and responsibilities. Your manager will be a great source of information if you have any queries relating to safeguarding, as they will have the experience to inform and advise you. If you are unsure about something, you should always ask your manager. Other colleagues, such as more senior co-workers or your organisation's safeguarding lead, may also provide you with information and guidance. Finally, you can find information and advice about safeguarding by conducting your own research on the internet or watching television programs and news reports about abuse happening in care services. If you search the internet for safeguarding adult reviews or serious case reviews, you will be able to find some examples of investigations into abuse and neglect. Next, you are asked to provide an example of an individual's dignity and rights being promoted and an example of their dignity and rights being undermined. For this activity, think about ways that you promote the rights of the individuals that you care for. This could be ensuring they are involved in their care planning, building mutual trust between care staff and individuals. Individuals are made aware of the complaints process and know that they can use it at any time. Care staff promote the independence of individuals, reducing their reliance on others, or individuals are aware of their rights. An example of dignity and rights being promoted would be care staff assisting an individual to make a complaint so that it can be investigated properly. An example of an individual's dignity and rights being undermined would be if they made a verbal complaint but staff ignored it or did not take it seriously, perhaps attributing the complaint to the individual's condition. All complaints should be taken seriously, even if you believe them to be unfounded. Activities 10.2b and 10.2c ask you to explain how person-centred care, active participation, and the promotion of choice and rights can help to protect individuals that are receiving care. Firstly, person-centred care is about ensuring that care is guided by the care receiver's unique needs, wishes, and preferences. Working in this way involves collaboration and encourages individuals to speak up about what they like and dislike about their care provision, so that their care package can be tailored to their requirements. This promotes mutual trust and respect between individuals and their care staff, making them much more likely to communicate any issues or concerns they have. Active participation involves ensuring that an individual has everything they need to participate in activities and establish and maintain relationships as independently as possible. By maintaining their autonomy, individuals will be less dependent on others, which reduces the likelihood of experiencing abuse or neglect. By promoting an individual's right, including their right to choice, an individual is able to make their own decisions and take their own risks, ensuring that they can maintain control over their life. This contributes to their self-esteem, self-confidence, and overall well-being. For the next activity, you will need to find out the local policies and procedures for multi-agency adult safeguarding and explain how they link with your organisation's policies and procedures. Unfortunately, I am unable to provide a specific answer to this because each local authority has a slightly different implementation of multi-agency adult safeguarding. so this will vary depending on your geographical location. Your manager or safeguarding lead should be able to provide you with the specific information you need about this. Alternatively, you could contact your local Safeguarding Adults Board. Activity 10.2e asks you to list ways that likelihood of abuse can be reduced by managing risk and focusing on prevention. Managing risk and focusing on prevention could reduce the likelihood of abuse or neglect in the following ways. Individuals have as much independence as possible. Individuals are encouraged to make their own informed choices. Individuals' choices are respected. Individuals understand their rights. Individuals are more likely to report concerns they have. The next activity asks how a clear complaints procedure can reduce the likelihood of abuse or neglect. It is important that poor standards of care can be challenged so that care provision can be improved. If individuals are encouraged to speak up and are confident that their complaints will be taken seriously without fear of reprisals, then the likelihood of abuse and neglect is reduced. This is because individuals are more likely to raise concerns before they come to harm, and potential abusers know that their actions will not be covered up. Activity 10.3a asks you to read your employer's safeguarding and whistleblowing policies and procedures and explain what you should do if you have suspicions of abuse or neglect. Of course, policies and procedures are going to vary between organisations, so it is important that you refer to your own employer's policies and procedures. In most cases, you would report your concerns to your manager. Where this is not possible, for example, if your manager is a suspect in the abuse, you should speak to a more senior level manager or your safeguarding lead if you have one. There may be times when you need to use your organisation's whistleblowing policy to report unsafe or illegal practices to an external organisation. Where the safety of individuals receiving care is involved, you should report to the Care Quality Commission, and concerns about the safety of staff should be reported to the Health and Safety Executive. Other outside agencies you may report concerns to include social services and the police. Whistleblowing policies make it clear that an individual cannot be treated unfavourably for reporting a genuine concern to an external agency. The next activity asks you to list 9 pieces of legislation, policies and procedures that are relevant to safeguarding. Some options you may want to consider include the Care Act 2014, the Mental Capacity Act 2008, the Data Protection Act 2018, including GDPR, the Human Rights Act 1998, the Equality Act 2010, the Mental Health Act 1983, the Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act 2006, the Health and Social Care Act 2012, Public Interest Disclosure Act 1998, No Secrets from 2000, which was a government white paper. Activity 10.4b asks you to explain why it is important to share information with relevant key people and agencies when safeguarding adults. Sharing information with partner agencies is essential for protecting and safeguarding adults because it provides the facts needed for each partner to perform their role effectively. However, this should be on a need-to-know basis, and confidentiality should be maintained as much as possible. In addition, it is also important to try to gain the consent of victims of abuse or neglect. However, if this is not forthcoming, a decision will have to be made about whether information should be shared anyway, to protect the individual or others from further abuse or neglect. If an individual discloses that they have been abused, you should always report this to your manager or safeguarding lead as soon as possible. You should never give assurances to an individual that you won't pass on information that they disclose to you, as this will not always be possible. The final activity asks you to describe 2 things that you could do if you reported concerns about abuse or neglect, but they were not taken seriously or handled appropriately. First, if you had reported your concerns to your manager in the first instance, you could escalate it to more senior management or the registered manager of your organisation. This would ensure that your voice is heard in the top levels of the organisational hierarchy. At this stage, it would also be important to report concerns in writing so that there is a paper trail. A second option would be to use the whistleblowing procedure to report your concerns to an outside agency, such as the Care Quality Commission. Under whistleblowing policy, you are protected from being treated unfavourably by your organisation for reporting a genuine concern to an outside agency, and CQC allows you to make your disclosure anonymous. You are legally and morally obligated to report any concerns you have about safeguarding. And that's it for Standard 10. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video useful. If you require any additional help or want to send feedback about this video, please feel free to use the comment section below or visit my website dsdweb.co.uk. The link in the description will take you to more detailed information for this standard. And if you've not already done so, please click the like and subscribe buttons below. Until next time, goodbye.